right, good evening, everybody. Tonight is September 18th, 2024. This is the Upper Dublin School District Finance Committee, and I will call the meeting to order. We have, I guess, two presentations tonight. Bill Slaughter is here from ICS. Bill, why don't you kick us off? Okay, my apologies.
I think we're good, yeah. So my name is Jen Leone. I'm a senior program manager with ICS, and yes, we have Bill Slaughter, and he's a construction manager with ICS. I am here tonight to present the landscaping and drainage project. I'm going to give an overview of the design, walk you through and review our estimates, our recommendation, and what our next steps are. There are a couple slides related to the softball field that Bill will walk you through afterwards, and we have time for questions and answers in between and after. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so as you might remember, the landscaping and plan was intentional to replenish the storm damaged areas. In June, we came to the district with conceptual plans. The district made recommendations to break it into add alternates and reduce some of that scope. And so we came back in July with our final plans. And we were asked at that time what our method to bid would be and what that timeline would be. So during that same timeline when we were researching that, I came in here in August and I sort of gave you guys a brief update of what that project would look like. And so now I'm back to walk you through all of those decisions. While you're looking at these plans, please keep in mind that all the trees and shrubs that have been chosen for the landscaping project are in accordance with the Upper Dublin Township Landscaping Ordinance. Okay, so the base bid and alternates. This is the landscaping final design. Everything that you see in the bubble or clouded areas is within the scope of the landscaping documents. If you can see it, there are like bright green trees. Those are your deciduous or canopy trees. They are primarily maples, cedars, and pines. There are little black dots or stars, depending on how close you're sitting and how well you can see them. Those are evergreen trees, and the majority of those trees are spruces. They're shrubs, and they come in a variety of different heights and different widths. So there's a blue bubble up there. That is our base scope. There are two add alternates, the cyan bubble or cloud. That is alternate 1. That it runs parallel with the retaining wall for the parking lot and will provide screening for that retaining wall. On the edge of the property is a mustard or orange colored bubble or cloud that has additional plantings in it. So just as a reminder again that the goal of this project is to replenish all the trees that were pulled out during the tornado and to also provide some additional screening for the future transportation facility. So this is our drainage design. I left the trees in there for reference. If you can see it clearly, there is a dark green line that cuts across the center of the drawing. That is your existing stormwater drainage system. The proposed system is a dark purple line that runs parallel with the retaining wall and then goes off on an angle and ties into that existing drainage. The intent of this is to catch any of the runoff from the parking lot or any of the water weeping through the holes of the retaining wall before it enters the play field to prevent or alleviate any of the puddling in those adjacent play fields. Next slide, please. So for the base bid work scope budget, it includes the base landscaping blue bubble and all the drainage work. And that came in at $263,000. And also that includes an 18-month warranty, standard warranty. Add alternate 1 was that cyan colored area that provided additional plantings to screen the parking lot. That came in around $40,000. Alternate 2 was the plantings on the end of the property for an additional approximate $22,000. And finally, there was a request to provide a extended maintenance contract and warranty for an additional 3 years in lieu of the standard 18-month warranty, and that was $30,000. There are about $43,000 in professional services, and it is ICS's recommendation to move forward with the entirety of the estimate for $389,410. So this is a high-level overview of the schedule. Everything in green has been completed, so we are done with the design documents. And tonight we are here for board approval. Upon board approval, ICS would prepare and put out bid documents, and then we would come back in either December or January with another recommendation to the board for that contractor. The goal of this project is to have everything planted next spring season. So we're shooting to have everything planted and installed in May and April and May of next year, with the final completion being done at the end of July. Thank you. So what are the next steps? So upon approval tonight, and as part of those professional services agreements, ICS would prepare bid documents, and that would include specifications for the contractors to bid. We would write the requests, we would put them out, we would bring them back, we would verify that those bids are complete, and then we would verify the qualifications of those contractors. At that time, we would put another recommendation together. We would come back to the board and present that recommendation. Upon that approval, ICS would continue to help the district in executing those contracts. We would work in a capacity as an owner rep, assisting the district with management of the project. We would help them keep the contractors on schedule and assist with the permitting and assist with a closeout of that project. Let me just make sure I got everything here, sorry. And again, I just want to remind everybody, the goal is to make sure that we're hitting the spring planting season, which would be next April and May. And so lastly, it is our recommendation to the board here tonight that you move forward with the base bid scopes, including alternates 1, 2, and 3. And the next couple slides are for the softball field, but we're going to take a break, and I just want to answer any questions now as they pertain to the landscaping.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Just to add one thing, and Jen, this is my fault. I think I missed this when we were reviewing the presentation. I think we don't need formal board approval tonight. I think what we're looking for from the committee is the okay to move forward with the bidding process so that we can prepare to bring back up a project for formal approval.
Thanks, I had that in my notes as well. So questions from the committee? Beth?
Yeah, thanks for all that. The extended warranty for 36 months, is that just for the landscaping, or does that apply to the drainage part as well?
Yeah, good question. That is just for the landscaping. It's in lieu of the 18 months, and it would be maintenance for the existing shrubs. So trees typically do well within the first year, but sometimes they, weed off within the year 2 or year 3. So the landscaper would come out and provide fertilization, do proper pruning, maintain watering, and then should any of the plantings not make it within that time period, they would be responsible for replacing them.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
My second question, Andy, this might be more for you, I'm not sure, is the slide says bidding it through co-stars. And I mean, I'm familiar with co-stars in terms of how we use it, but could you explain like how it would work in this context? And is that good, bad, or indifferent in terms of attracting bidders, et cetera, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it would work the same way. The only thing is we wouldn't just target one vendor. So I think ICS has a plan to, they've got multiple vendors that they've identified that have co-star contracts that would work for the work that we're going to do. So we would still request 3 bids or 3 proposals from vendors that can do this work. This is something that we did review with our solicitors, so they were comfortable with this approach for this project. So yeah, we definitely still want to make sure we're getting competitive pricing.
Great.
I agree with everything that Andy just said. The goal is to make sure that we have a minimum of 3 bidders, just like we would if we were to go out for public bid. And the pro to this is that we can actually control the quality of those bidders before opening it up to just anybody. And we can also expedite that timeline to make sure that we're hitting the spring planting season.
Great, thanks so much.
Yep.
Jenna?
Yeah, so a couple questions. So number one, the primary purpose of this plan, as it says, is I want to make sure we kind of disentangle it from discussions about transportation facilities, because this really is just to replace what was damaged from the tornado. So is it fair to say nothing about this would be impacted in any way by a go or a no-go decision on the transportation facility? This is just completely separate, correct?
That is correct.
And then my second question is, we did get a public comment tonight, a written one about, some concerns about the facilities there and the lack of trees, et cetera. So is it fair to say this really does kind of put us back to where things were, at least pre-tornado? They may not be as mature as maybe they were then, and obviously that's going to take time, but
Correct.
I should think of this as a true putting back what we lost and then some, I
And
think,
then
right?
some,
Yeah,
that is
right.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair.
And it won't be overgrown, and it will come in neat and clean, so you can maintain it from here on forward. And it's planted in the appropriate areas to provide the screening that you're looking for. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Halima?
Andy, can you just review the insurance coverage for this project again?
Sure. So just to be clear, this is not part of the insurance claim, right? So trees that were lost were not something that were covered by our insurance policy. But if you remember, a lot of the work that we did created value engineering credits that we received money back from the insurance beyond the work that we did. So we transferred that money to our capital reserve fund, and we talked about utilizing that money in a couple of ways. One was for the softball field project, and one was for this work that we're doing here. So it will be funded by the capital reserve fund, but that's ultimately from insurance proceeds that we received back.
And then for ICS, so the maturity of the trees, how many years before we see full maturity and the trees all grown up?
Some of them will take decades to reach full height and full growth. However, the landscape architect did choose trees of a larger caliber, so they won't be, they won't be small. They're probably 6 to 8 feet when they go in on day one. But some of them will grow to be 20 or 30 feet or even 50 feet tall. So it will take several years for those trees to reach full height.
And then the drainage that we're putting in, will this solve the playground?
The playfield, the adjacent playfield, it will alleviate
Yes.
they will alleviate a lot of the puddling that you have over there now by collecting the water before it has an opportunity to actually roll downhill and onto the playfield.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The only question I have left, the timing, so I understand the spring planting season, but the timing of the drainage project relative to the school calendar, is that likely to be before the end of the school year?
So we have considered this quite a bit, and there are a couple different ways to move forward with this. We can do it all at once, and if phasing seems to be the better solution to that, we can do the landscaping first and then wait for the school year to end to do the drainage portion of the project. That is something that I think is better suited to walk through with our contractors once they're on board to make that final determination, but that is something that we've been considering.
Okay, so that doesn't need to be part of the bid documents then?
There will be 2 separate bid documents. There'll be one specifically for the landscaping, and there'll be a separate set of documents for the drainage so that we can move with them in separate directions if we have to.
Okay, great.
In addition to that, we are expecting that the drainage will require permitting, and we're not clear if the township will require anything for the landscaping, which is another reason we broke it apart. But it is our intent to sit down with the township as soon as possible to get those questions answered.
Okay, great. All right, any other questions from the rest of the board? Okay, thanks, Jen.
You're quite welcome.
I think, Bill, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. I wanted to give you an update on the softball field. As I'm sure everybody's aware, hasn't been a lot of progress out there, and we've run into some challenges with the site. So this first slide depicts the area of the softball field, and due to a bust in the elevation, which means we used existing as-built drawings as our benchmark to design the field, those drawings were incorrect. There's an area that you see in green in the top right-hand corner that remains, while it's going to be slightly lower, that was already called for to be lowered on the construction documents. But the area in red was supposed to remain the same, and that is now going to have to be excavated down. And it tapers as we get out to that blue area, and the blue area was always part of the contract. So if you would go to the next slide, Brooke, please. How this came about was that while we were doing the new grading stakeout on the field, the general contractor notified us of the conflict between the elevations and what we had drawn. So we used the 2008 drawings from CMX, which was incorrect based on the benchmark that's there. So additional excavation is going to have to be provided in the infield area only. There was some notes on that prior drawing that showed the ramps may have to be modified. We took some additional elevations, sent that to the architect, and this morning we received new elevations. None of the ramping and the sidewalks has to be touched. So it's only the infield that needs additional grading. We selected this method in discussions with the district based upon not wanting to impact the grass growth that's already in place in the outfield. So that decision was made, rather than trying to level that out, that we would over excavate the infield down and bring it back up. Originally, the infield mix was scheduled to remain except for that outer blue area, and we were supposed to incorporate a conditioning mix into that infield. Now we are going to have to replace some of that infield mix. We are going to harvest what we can and set that aside and try to utilize that back in, but we are going to have to get more infield mix than what we originally intended. And as I said, we did do some additional survey points. That was along the parking lot and the roadway to make sure we were in compliance there and that there was no issues with the grading there. We did confirm that. So the ramps do not have to be extended or modified. Right now, we don't have a cost estimate because we just got the elevations today. We're going to sit down and do a detailed cost estimate, ICS will, square foot by square foot of what has to come out and what was originally called for in the drawings. We will base that against the change order from the general contractor for their additional services. So we will be coming to you in the next meeting with a change order request for Skepton Construction for that additional work. ICS, as your representative and supposed to be the watchdog for you, we obviously failed in our mission by not catching this oversight. So we are willing to help out with this change order. Mr. Leckman's made it very clear that the district is not going to accept any of the financial burden of this change order. We agree with that statement and acknowledge that we missed the mark on this one. I don't have a commitment from the architect as well, but we will do what we can on our side to mitigate that and make that go away. Are there any questions as far as what's going on with the softball field?
And the only thing, just to make sure, the contract, certainly I appreciate the conversations that we've had with our ICS team. As the contract is owned by the district, we would have a change order that would need to be approved and change the total dollars on the project, and then we would have to work out some of those details after the fact.
That's correct. Yeah, the contract is between the school district and the contractor, so a change order would have to be have to be issued, and then we could work that out after the fact.
All right, I appreciate that. Thanks. Questions from the committee?
Not so much a question, but I really appreciate your, candor and you all stepping up on this one. It's not easy to publicly say we missed something, but that stuff does happen. And so I just personally appreciate that you all are being a good partner. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we recognize that the district is a partner of ours and one of our best clients, so certainly don't want to leave you with a bad taste in your mouth for what's taking place here.
Yeah, well said, Jenna. Alima, did you have something?
Do you anticipate this changing the timeline when the softball field will be completed?
We are right on the edge right now of, making the spring season. We still think we can do it. There's going to be some additional modifications we need to do to ensure the grass growth over the winter, such as blankets. We've had discussions with the district about that, some additional maintenance items. But we do anticipate having it for the spring season. One thing we don't have right now is building permits. We expect them any day now. We've been working to get the township what they have requested in a quick and timely manner, usually within a day. They just asked for something again today, so we'll make sure they get that by tomorrow. We got them some engineering reports that they were looking for, additional ones. So we're expecting that any day now to get started. That's why we haven't started work in that area yet. They did give us a green light to do some work, and we have completed some of that work. We've dug the pits for the bullpen areas. We installed some of the drainage pipe, but they didn't want us to proceed on any of the hardscaping work, concrete and that kind of thing until they finished review of the permits.
All right. I just want to clarify, Bill, throughout the original drawings that had the problem were from CMX, just so everyone knows that was the engineering firm that was responsible for the high school project.
Yeah, those drawings were from 2008, yes.
Right. Any questions from the rest of the board? All right. Thanks for that update, Bill.
Thank you.
Hopeful that we can get this done on schedule as planned. We will move on into the agenda. Any announcements?
There are no announcements this evening.
All right, we do have minutes from our August 21st meeting. Members of the committee, any comments or questions on the minutes? All right, we'll move those forward?
Yes.
Yes, all right, thank you. And we'll move on to the reports and recommendations, starting with disposal of excess, obsolete, non-repairable equipment, which this month looks like a continuation of the trophy case updates. All right, any comments or questions? All right, we'll move that forward. Yes, all right, thanks, and on to monthly financial reports.
Yes, thank you. So a couple things to review in this month's financials. So this closes August this month. So you can see we've had a significant amount of, as is typical, tax revenue come in August. So when you look at our receipts, though, I want to note that they are below where we have been prior years. So total receipts received year to date is about 61% of budget compared to 66% of budget. And there is a reason for that. So it's primarily due to real estate tax collections. And if you look at the other financial reports, you can see there's a comparison of our tax collections this August compared to last August. And if you remember when we approved the resolutions, we talked about the end of the discount period is typically August 31st. This year, that was extended to September 3rd because August 31st was on a weekend, and then we had the holiday come right up. So our tax collector estimates that just in that small window in September, he collected about $2.8 million, as a lot of folks just wait right till the end of the discount period to make that payment to still get the 2% discount. So that really kind of closes the gap when you compare that year over year, as we were about $3 million short and $2.8 million came in, so very much in line. So I think that explains the revenue side and why we're slightly lower than where we were last year. Total expenses, again, July and August, as we don't have the majority of our staff working over the summer months, our expenditures are fairly low as a percentage of budget over the summer. So we're 6% compared to 4%. Again, slightly higher slightly higher than prior year. This year, there was a timing issue where payroll occurred on August last year versus September 1st this year. So or last year it was September. This year, the first pay was on August 30th. So you'll see that catch up next month. But everything looks to be in order on the expenditure side. On investments, just to note, our interest income, we budget, when we talk about budget, we budget 3% for our interest income. And if you paying attention to the Fed and some of the conversation that's happened today, you saw that the Fed reduced their target rate by 0.5 percentage point. So there was some discussion on whether it was going to be a quarter or a half. They went all the way to 0.5, so that lowered the lower end of their range to 4.75%. And the forecast, again, the Fed doesn't necessarily give a forecast, but there are folks out there that do this work. They're estimating we'll see another 0.5 point over the rest of the year. So there's 2 more Fed meetings. So we'll likely see another 0.5% reduction down to 4.25%. So we'll keep our eye on that. And then there's also expected to be reductions through 2025 at this point as well. So important to watch that, especially as we start preliminary budget discussions this evening. The other thing I'll note is just EIT is trending very much more in line. So, we've done work over the last couple of years to really get our earned income tax budget in line. So we're trending only slightly ahead of where we were prior year. July was about 3% more, August was 2% more. So again, very much in line with budget, and transfer taxes is trending normally for the first 2 months of the year. So those are my updates, but if there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Anyone have any comments or questions on the monthly financials? All right, thank you. We'll move those ahead. Yes, all right. The PCCD School Safety and Mental Health Grant.
Yeah, so this is informational only, but we did think it was important to bring this forward and just talk about it and give the committee an update on the PCCD School Safety and Mental Health Grant. So if you're familiar with the state budget again was passed late this year. So we closed our budget in June, and the state budget was finally approved in July. And as part of that state budget was another PCCD, which is the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, another grant that was available to schools for the 24-25 school year. We learned about it with the passing of the budget, but there was really no details. Finally, on August 8th, which was the attachment with the agenda item, we did receive the funding announcement. And then we started getting additional information about kind of what that grant entailed. And you can see that the district's allocation, our allocation is $175,462. And it is a non-competitive formula-based grant that can be utilized for either school safety or mental health related purposes. So we also learned that our grant application needed to be submitted by September 26th. So we started working pretty quickly to get our team together to make decisions on how we were going to utilize this funding and to get this grant application submitted next week, which we feel like we're very well positioned to do at this point. So our district safety coordinator, Mr. Creamer, had actually, he's completed evaluations of district buildings and has them aligned to the tiered criteria of the grant. And has those projects actually already in priority order. We've been having a lot of discussions as our leadership team about how we take that list that he's put together and create budget for it, and also to create, to figure out which projects may be eligible to utilize capital funds on. So again, we've been having a lot of discussions about, physical safety of buildings and how we can continue to enhance that in all of our buildings. So we think this is an excellent opportunity to take $175,000 of those identified projects and move those forward as part of this grant opportunity for physical safety infrastructure and system enhancements. These items are all directly related to physical safety of buildings, so we're not going to go into the details of the items at this meeting, but certainly the board will continue to receive information on the details as those improvements are put into place. And then the grant funding, the period, this is available from July 1st of this year to June 30th of 2026. So it's actually a 2-year grant period, but our goal would be to get all of our proposed work done within this fiscal year, as there's important items that we're going to be working on. So again, we're well positioned to get this work done, but we did think it was an important item just to bring the committee up to date on and let you know what we're working on there.
All right, comments or questions? Go ahead, Jenna.
Yeah, so look, this is great that we got this grant, and, you know, looking at the list of items, I'm, you know, always happy to see us improve our physical security. The only question I had is, I know it's for physical security and mental health, was there discussion about whether there were any additional mental health resources, or do we feel like we were good there? And this is, I guess to some extent, this is how are we paying for things we already wanted to do? So maybe we already had plans in place to pay for those things, but I'm just curious if there was discussion about any other mental health things we wanted to add.
Sure, thank you, Ms. Evans. Certainly, I would say there's always a continued need for mental health resources. However, at this point in time, we did prioritize the physical safety of our school buildings and some of those things that are on the Tier 1 criteria list for physical safety. We need to do some additional time investigating what other mental health resources are available that might align with some of our PACE survey data and what might be out there. So this turnaround time was also a little bit shorter than we would have liked for that. And again, feel that prioritizing these physical safety pieces is where we want to be right now.
I'll also point out, because this is one-time grant money, many of the types of services that we might spend for mental health are ongoing costs and not appropriate, therefore, for grant funding. Anyone else? Alima.
Well, once we have, I see this, you know, the list of items that we are putting in with the application. I'm curious if we'll have the safety coordinator come in and talk about or demonstrate the improvements that we've made to the safety of our schools for the community, or how will we go about discussing the improvements that are being made with this funding?
So, and certainly, Mr. Luckman, you might want to add on to this. I think that we could review which ones of these may be appropriate to share in public, but typically safety items are more of an executive session topic, but there may be some that we could generalize. So we can talk to Mr. Creamer about what that would look like. And certainly, as he's done his Tier 1, 2, and 3 assessment, and we plan the larger plans, we can share more with the board as well.
John.
So is this, Andy, I'm reading, this is a new program this year, or is that accurate? And any idea if this will be available in subsequent years?
So it's actually not a new program. The PCCD has been allocated state funding over the last couple of state budget years. It's just never guaranteed from year to year. So that's why we don't plan for it until it's actually approved as part of the state budget. So I think it's about 4 or 5 years running at this point, but it's changed. It's come out in different forms. So so that's why we don't plan for something until it's actually approved in the state budget.
Anyone else? All right, so let's see, do we have action to take on this? I don't think we do. Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. We'll move on. It's time to start talking about budget.
Yes, I was talking to a couple folks on the way in today about just how it seems like July and August are the only months we get to not talk about budget. We're still paying attention to what's going on financially, but those are the only months it seems. We typically every year get started in September talking about budget, and tonight we'll just again briefly highlight the budget timeline as kind of we walk through the process, so we won't have any heavy lift discussions this evening. But what's attached tonight is the draft, and I'm calling it a draft timeline for the 25-26 budget cycle for 2 reasons. One is the official Act 1 index, which is the maximum that a board can consider raising property taxes by, has been certified for next year. So it's 4% is the Act 1 index, the base Act 1 index. But the Act 1 timeline that goes along with that really lays out all of the deadlines that we need to manage through the process has not been released yet. So I have kind of some placeholders in here in the general timeline of how I want to how I see us walking through this. And then once that Act 1 timeline comes out, then we'll update this, bring it back to the board, and make sure everything's kind of set in stone as we move through that. So everything is based, that kind of backs up off of the primary election in the spring. There's dates that we can estimate and generally understand, but again, it's just an estimate at this point. The other reason it's an estimate is because our board meetings, there's some TBD dates out past January because our board doesn't set the dates for the meetings until after the organizational meeting in December. So page 1 of this document lays out the steps towards our major budget decision processes. So the first major budget decision that we come across that I hope to have done by November, December of this year is to determine whether the board's going to approve an opt-out resolution stating that our final tax increase will be at or below the Act 1 index of 4.0%, or if the board wants to move through the full preliminary budget process to basically show that we have a need for a tax increase above the Act 1 index and apply for referendum exceptions for PSERS, which is the state pension system, expenditure increases, and expenditure increases in special education. So again, as I said, my goal is to make a recommendation on the chosen path by November, as I believe it's probably not likely at this point that we'll need a tax increase beyond that 4% Act 1 index. But again, that will come with more formal presentations that will go through in October and November. So at the October meeting, what we'll go through is we'll talk about the estimated results from the 23-24 year. Again, we've been talking about those. There shouldn't be any significant changes from what we reviewed last month. So we'll look at that. We'll look at our 5-year projection model, including the key assumptions that we utilize for the preliminary budget. Again, we build the preliminary budget off of assumptions. We use revenues and trends, and we use expenditure trends as well. We don't ask our buildings and departments to put together detailed budgets 8 months before the end of the year. And we utilize that to determine what our trends are, how our financials are trending, and then what we need to consider for next year. We will continue to utilize a needs-based budget philosophy. So we will continue to make sure all of our buildings and departments are taking a detailed look at their budget every single year in order to, again, not just take their current year and roll it forward and add some percentage onto it. We will take a new look at everyone's budget as we do every single year. And that also goes for our staffing planning as well. And then what we'll do is we'll do that work from January to April. And then we'll bring a proposed final budget in May to a final budget in June. So it's a 9 to 10 month process that we go through every year on the budget. And then again, just to back up, revenue, we'll do the same thing as last year. My planning would be, so we would go through in March a detailed revenue presentation, and in April we would go through a detailed expenditure presentation. So that kind of lays out my plan for the year. It's very similar to what we've utilized in prior years, and look forward to another successful year of budgeting. So any questions about the timeline?
Anyone have questions about the budget timeline? All right, no action to take there. Thank you for that. Financial support for the North Hills after-school program.
Yes, thank you. So this is an item that we do go through every year. So it's an item that is included in our budget. So the budget for the 24-25 fiscal year continues the support for the North Hills Collective Educational Program in an amount of $45,000. This is a program that's run by the North Hills Collective. They run it out of North Hills Community Center, and it provides after-school and summer educational opportunities for students in the district. The district has provided this support for a number of years, and again, the budget continues that support. So we do bring this forward to the committee just because it's a unique item. We like to make sure the committee's aware of it and do ask for approval of this item to kind of start the process to release funds to the North Hills Collective Group. The document that's attached to this agenda item, so I believe it was probably 2 years ago at this point, we worked with the North Hills Collective and to come up with a process that we would follow before we just release these funds to them. So there is an accountability measure with the group. They are responsible to give us budget documentation and then also keep us updated throughout the year on their actual expenditures on their programming and also projected expenditures through the end of the year. So we do release the funds kind of in two buckets to them as they request. So when they submit the initial information to us, justifying that they've utilized all the funds from the prior year and that provide us with the budget for their current year, we release the first half. And then mid-year or so, we go through a review with them to look at expenditures to date and make sure they've utilized, again, all funds that we've released to them before we release the second batch. So there's a review process, and again, we stay in close contact with the group over there to make sure everything is organized and tracked carefully. So any questions that we can answer on that?
Any questions or comments on the North Hills Collective? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious how we determine the amount of 45,000. What's the history behind coming to that number? Just curious around that.
Yeah, and that number has been the standard number. So they do actually, as part of their budget, they show us, what their funding sources are, and they've been able to continue to provide this source to provide those programs with that amount of money. It's not just us, though. They also do receive other grant opportunities. The township also does contribute to their programs as well.
So that's just been the steady amount that we've given them year over year, and they haven't requested more. There's been no, okay.
That's correct. It's been a steady amount, and they have not requested more.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's been 45,000 as long as I can remember, actually. Yeah, it's been a long time for sure. Anyone else? Okay, so we will move that one forward for approval. Yes. All right. Thank you. So we are through our reports and recommendations, and we're up to public participation. If anyone would like to address the committee, please come to the mic, state your name and your city of residence, or affirm that you are a resident or taxpayer before addressing the board.
Jenny Vitella, Ambler. The ICS situation with the softball field. I'm beyond bothered by that it's a huge mess. I'm glad they're not supposedly going to charge us for it, but it reduces my trust and understanding and appreciation of the quality of work they are to provide. That is huge. And they've already torn up the base softball field. So it's been unusable for township activities all summer. It's unusable for the fall ball season for softball. And now we might be eking into the high school sports season. And so they already missed kind of a deadline or something with land development, or didn't do the right thing. And so it already got delayed originally. And this is the second one. It's like, how many times can you kind of mess up and then say it's okay? It's really upsetting to me. The trees along Fort Washington, I won't bring up the drawing, but there's a driveway. Anybody who knows Fort Washington Elementary School, and I hope you all have been there to see how close this bus depot is supposed to be to these kids. There's a driveway that actually used to lead to a house, the Van Zandt home, actually. Along that driveway, that fake driveway, which we would use to get in there and park in that area in the grass as overflow parking. That had tall, old, deciduous trees. So it gave a canopy. We had picnic tables. We would have our class parties there. Some kids would play like balloon games on the smaller field towards the parking lot. But we also used that field, the outfield basically of the softball field, of the baseball field there, for gym, recess, field day. And that was kind of a nice gathering point. They have shrubs there, okay? They also have a big deciduous tree by the we call it the MAP playground that's up the steps, and there's like right in the corner when it meets the parking lot and this MAP playground before the steps. It's like, that's an unnecessary. I picture leaves there not being picked up on a timely basis and making a huge mess. So it's like someone put these trees there, and I don't know how well they knew what it looked like before. So I really think that some of the placement of these items should be maybe someone who is at Fort Washington, who's maybe been on the garden committee or has had kids there, should be helpful on that. I've also been told there's concern among parents that are driving through Carline, the unused portion of the lot that's going to be a bus depot supposedly, that it looks like work is already being done. The lights are coming down or something, and it looks like purposely patched out grass being torn up and other smoothing out or other things happening to that area that looks like it's being preempted and already worked on. And this has many parents concerned, since many parents are still fighting against this monstrosity and hideous thing in and amongst all the kids. So hope that's not true. That's a question if that's happening. Also, changing of the traffic pattern coming out of the high school since a child was hit by a car at the intersection that many of us have argued and contended that that intersection at Highland and Fort Washington is extremely dangerous. There's a ton of walkers in this area, and they changed the traffic patterns coming out of the high school, one of which is a no left turn on Lockash. I want to know who is able to make that decision coming out of Spark. No, so basically I came from field hockey, and I'm not allowed to make my left onto Lockash, okay, to come to this meeting, which is just ridiculous. And I will tell you what, it backs up traffic on Lockash, but it's getting stuff out of, I guess, the Highland and Fort Washington exit. But what's happened is people are speeding and cutting through now, Farm and Van Zandt. So we're just displaying this traffic and making it worse in residential areas to try to alleviate a problem of a kid getting hit at a busy intersection that we've been saying is busy. I have a million other questions. And also, is there a place to report if buses are cutting through our neighborhood with no kids in it? It's a concern. It's happening already, and this is without 50 buses in the parking lot of Fort Washington Elementary School. Thank you.
Okay, nobody else coming up. I will close public participation. We did have 2 comments submitted through the online form that the board has had a chance to review before the meeting. Any responses from, starting with the administration?
I'll just share, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Leckman, but to my knowledge, absolutely no work on a transportation future facility site has been started at Fort Washington Elementary School. So I will certainly look into what was shared and what maybe is being referenced. The traffic pattern at the high school was not changed as a result of the student accident on the second day of school. I believe that was in conjunction between our safety coordinator and the township. And Upper Dublin Police in looking at that. Some of the other things that were mentioned, I will need to look into, but Mr. Leckman, if you know more, certainly.
The only thing I'll add, I will concur that there's no work happening down there. I know there was work, and I'm looking at Mr. Lesser, there was work done to prepare the area for the parent drop-off and to kind of put stone down in there because there were a lot of potholes that were back there. So I don't know if you have anything to add, but yes, that was the only work I'm aware of.
Was we had the geotechnical testing last spring where they made test pits, but then we did have our contractor go through before the start of school, spread new stone anywhere the test pits had settled, we filled it in and make it level again. But no other work has occurred down there.
And I'll just add, I forgot the one thing noted, certainly reporting a bus cutting through, that can be to our Director of Transportation, Mr. Robbins, and I know he's already been addressing that as it's been brought to our attention.
There was a comment about placement of the new landscaping that we reviewed the proposal for tonight. I just want to clarify that the goal was not to make it look exactly like it looked before. It was to identify the best places to put new growth. I don't know who was involved from the district in who participated in those decisions. Was somebody from the school part of that?
Yeah, so Mr. Lesser and I were part of those discussions, right? Not at the school themselves, but again, I think you're right, is we identified areas that we thought would be best for planting, and then there are trees placed on that plan. I think at the end of the day, we'll have some control around the specific areas that they get planted, but those are the general areas that we're going to do planting in. So yes, we were part of the conversation. Nobody at the school itself was part of the conversation. Sean McAleer has obviously been up to speed on the project.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board? All right. So our next Finance Committee meeting will be Wednesday, October 16th at 6 p.m. right here in the Cardinal Room, and we are adjourned.